Now, Chris, when you mentioned 600,000 people are losing the supply of water, is it their drinking water? Is it the water that they're consuming as individuals, or is it farming water? What kind of water are we talking about?
All of it. So if you look at Sonoma County, you'll see that the Russian River predominantly works its way through the middle of the county. And then roughly the midpoint, it makes its way west out to the coast. And so what you have is a very large plain that is fed by this major river. And so you have, whether it be vineyards or cattle, any of the agricultural producers, they rely on the water supply that's provided through this river to everyone. It also provides for aquifer recharge, which is where many of our municipalities pull their water supply from. So it impacts everything from the commercial and industrial interests all the way down to the individual interests as well.
So the river would still flow, right? What will happen?
So according to the studies that were commissioned by PG&E and by Sonoma Water, no less than 5 years out of 10, the water in Lake Mendocino will go dry. And that is the last storage facility before the Russian River. So ostensibly, the water in the Russian River will disappear 5 years out of 10, which means
because there is no storage, right?
half the time our county will not have water. And this impacts all the way down to Marin County, which is a very affluent county. And most of them aren't even aware, but Marin County at large receives roughly 25% of their water from Sonoma County. And Novato, which is one of the northernmost cities in Marin County, receives approximately 75% of its water from Sonoma County. So you have arguably a 3-county spread that relies on this water source that will lose half of their water supply. And that's not including drought conditions.
When they lose this water supply, mainly municipalities will still have water, but the cost probably will go up, right?
Correct.
But then the agriculture would completely get cut off, right? Or to some level.
It eventually will become too cost prohibitive for them to produce any goods at a cost that is reasonable to the average consumer. So as their costs go up, the cost that they have to sell their goods at will then go up, driving up the cost of consumer goods. But we can't guarantee that there will be sufficient water for the municipalities either. Right now, most municipalities have about 2 years of water storage on hand. But as we've seen in California, we have a tendency to get exposed to extended drought conditions. In the preceding decade and a half, we had several years in a row where we had back-to-back drought conditions where Lake Pillsbury went dry and Lake Mendocino went dry and Lake Sonoma almost went dry. And these are at the periods of the season in which we need the water the most, particularly for firefighting. We've experienced some significant fire events up there, historic, some say. 2017, we had the Tubbs fire. If we don't have water in any of our water reservoirs, where is it that we're going to get the water to fight these fires? And that's one of the points that is kind of looked over by a lot of the people that are advocating for the removal, is that we haven't had that many significant fires, but we haven't had them because we had local water availability that allowed us to stop the fires before they got large. And we've had several of the fire chiefs in the region come out and say that this is a dangerous situation that's being created by the removal of this dam. They say that's not a plan, it's a disaster. And I support that statement, and I agree with that statement wholeheartedly.
So for these dams to be kept, somebody has to champion them.
Correct.
Essentially, there needs to be a new owner.
Correct.
Otherwise, they'll be gone, despite the effort of this group or lawsuits.
Correct.
And the outcome will be, from what you're saying, is these rivers will flow. There would be storage, right? There will be some sort of storage or no storage at all in the proposal.
There will be minimal storage. So the current proposal basically removes both of the dams. It removes Scott Dam and Cape Horn Dam, and it turns Cape Horn Dam into basically a way for a very low dam. And so what happens is it reduces the level in which the water is stored for diversion. And what would take place is that only in wintertime flows, when the water flow is the highest, will there actually be sufficient water for the water to get diverted into the Russian River. And so at the time in which we need the water the least is where we will have the water. And even by their own studies, the water won't be available after roughly August in the Russian River. So from August until the rains start again, there's no water available in Lake Mendocino or the Russian River. And again, by their own estimates, 5 years out of 10, there will be no water at all in Lake Mendocino regardless. Now, there's conversation about increasing the height of Lake Mendocino, but that doesn't matter if there's not sufficient water to be diverted at the right time of the year. So their whole thing is you're still going to get 30 to 40,000 acre feet per year, but instead of you getting 30 to 40,000 acre feet over a 12-month period, you're going to get it in a roughly 3 to 4 month period. And when it's gone, it's gone.
So their idea is they would remove these two dams and the water would get stored in Lake Mendocino eventually.
Eventually.
But your thoughts is that you're saying that that water would only be available for a certain period of time in Lake Mendocino. Right?
And their analysis proves that it would not be available after at least August. And once we get into September and October, that's when we run into fire season. And we've seen repeatedly that we have a very high likelihood, and we're now assessed formally as an extreme fire risk region because we don't have sufficient water to make sure that we have the firefighting capabilities. So the argument about keeping water in Lake Mendocino is kind of a red herring. It doesn't actually provide sufficient water flow throughout the year, because when they're going to have enough water to divert it into Lake Mendocino will already be overflowing because of the rainy season. So we don't have sufficient water to offset the loss of the roughly 26 billion gallons of fresh water that Lake Pillsbury provides for us.
So what you're saying is that the Lake Mendocino is not big enough.
Correct.
So when it gets full, then it's too full, and then when the time comes in August, it will be dry.
And it's not designed to be, and it's not designed to be big enough either. It's designed to be a complementary function to a much larger project. So, and the issue that we run into is that a lot of these people that are leading the destruction of the dam projects are trying to argue that these other reservoirs will be enough to offset, but they're not designed to be sufficient. What will happen is if we don't experience sufficient rain across an annual basis, all of the reservoirs will continue to deplete, and eventually they're all going to go empty. And even with Lake Pillsbury, we've already watched these reservoirs go empty, go dry.